moderating today's panel on the pivotal role of women within the Zoroastrian community and gender equality and challenging gender biases is Anisa Ostad. So born in Yazd in Iran, she moved to the United States with her family as a child and now studies law in Washington, D.C. She is co-chair of the Zoroastrian Association of Metropolitan Washington Incorporated, inaugural Gen Z committee. Her involvement with the Zoroastrian youth of North America has inspired her to be further involved with Zoroastrian youth worldwide. She is passionate about recognizing women's experiences, and a highlight of hers was to attend the NGO Committee on the Status of Women at the UN in 2021 as a Farzin delegate. So, here to moderate this session, Women in Zoroastrianism, and to introduce the panelists, would you please welcome Anisa? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending. So I would love to introduce the other panelists I'll be moderating today, but please welcome the other panelists. Farzin, if you would like to start with introductions by introducing yourself.
Sure. I am Farzin Avari. I am a virtual science teacher at a high school in Atlanta, Georgia.
Hi everyone, Shirin here from Karachi, Pakistan, also an educator in higher ed.
Hi, I'm Kimya. I'm from Australia and the United States, and happy to be here.
Hello, does that work? No. Sorry guys, technical difficulties. Still. Okay, thanks. Hello everyone, I'm Shazneen. I'm from London, and I work as a parliamentary policy advisor, having studied law.
Hi everyone, my name is Zeenia Cawasji. I am also a corporate lawyer, and I live from Karachi, Pakistan.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. So I'll begin the panel discussion with a synopsis of the panel discussion. So, our discussion this morning will serve as a platform to shed light on the pivotal role of women within the Zoroastrian community, exploring the multifaceted intersection of gender and participation across various domains, including the household, workplace, and wider community. By delving into the rich history of the Zoroastrian religion, which has traditionally valued gender equality and acknowledged the influential contributions of women throughout its development, the discussion aims to emphasize the significance of reclaiming the role of women in traditionally male-dominated spheres, such as priesthood, community leadership, and the creation of equitable spaces. The panelists will also share practical action points that the community members can implement to actively participate in the creation of equitable spaces, such as supporting women's initiatives, amplifying their voices, and challenging gender biases.
So for those of you in the crowd, we'd like for you to scan the QR code. We've got questions for you going along with our presentation. So if you'll go ahead and sign into that.
It'll be an interactive panel today.
As we flip through each slide, there'll be more questions for you.
So we'll give a second for people to do that, and then we'll jump right into the discussion. Thank you guys for scanning, and thank you in advance for your participation throughout the discussion. All right. So, we will jump into the panel discussion starting with Farzin. She will discuss what can be learned from Zoroastrian female leaders throughout history. Farzin, take it away.
So who are the female leaders you think of when you think of Zoroastrian women?
You can put that into the app or website.
Yeah. So For me personally, I think of the women that helped supported the Zoroastrian community in India. Jarbai Wadia put together community housing for us. And in that moment, it was for underprivileged families to have a place to stay. But now we have rich communities who have a really important grounding place. Even as we have transitioned and moved to North America, so many people have this identity that they came from this bog in India. So it's a really beautiful way to ground and support each other. Other women in India have put together hospitals and schools. In 1848, there was not one school for Indian women in India. And with the help of the Tatas, the Kamas, we, over the course of a few decades, began to educate all of our women. How many people in the crowd have a college degree? Just about everybody. Woo! Keep your hands raised if you have a graduate degree. Woo! So we have really put a lot of emphasis into educating our community.
Absolutely.
Having said that, it's important to note that when it came to education for women in the subcontinent region, that came at a second option. We had boys' schools first created, first established. This was true in Karachi, at that time India, but now Pakistan. And so it's important to recognize where we are placing these women leaders historically. Are we giving them the space or the recognition that they deserve? I'm sure folks are aware of the word history breaking into the two words his story. So who gets to decide what story gets told? How are the ways in which we are rewriting that narrative? I think all of us being here this morning, Farzin sharing the story from India, it is an example of how we get to reestablish or redefine how we choose to remember our stories. So an example from Karachi, Pakistan, the Baiver Baiji Supariwala High School was created in 1800s, and then a century later did the Mama Parsi Girls High School get established, just recognizing the fact that there was biases that existed when it came to even a progressive issue such as education.
Even today, only 2% of the world's statues are women. And women's stories get told at a far significantly less rate than men's stories.
Do you want to capture any responses from the formative? Anyone from the crowd want to share of any women leaders you think of, whether historically or religiously from the scriptures?
So just to chip in there, so when we do religious education classes, I think it's really important to, as you said, focus on the Zoroastrian queens, and they were amazing women. They ran armies. They're very powerful. So I really think that's important as well, you know, in the education from a young age.
Can I just jump in here? So just for you guys in the audience, the artifact-looking one with the blue background, with the navy blue background, just to that point, it's good for us all to recognize that the daughter of Cyrus the Great that ran these armies, did incredible things. Her name is Atusa, and that's how it's spelt. And so just even remembering this incredible woman's name, even in conversation, just does so much to empower women. So thank you for identifying that, and that is an actionable item we can take away from today, that she existed and she was so amazing.
I love that so many of you said that women that have the biggest impact in your lives are your mothers. So I think it would be really interesting to start documenting their stories and making sure that we have those to share with the next generations.
I think a classic one is Artemisia. I think she was the admiral of the Navy. And I think famously, there was like a storm and she was like, idiots, like don't take the ships out into the storm, and like some king overruled her and then they lost all the ships.
That one was Artemis, guys. Remember these names? Artemisia and Otsa. Jennifer.
One of the women who helped draft the UN Declaration of Human Rights and changed the very first bit from all men are created equal to all humans are created equal.
Oh wow, where was that from?
That's the UN
Oh.
Declaration of Human Rights.
Oh wow,
Hansa Mehta was her name.
amazing.
The woman that comes to mind is actually Roxana, which is my name and I'm embodying her. She is named after a powerful princess, which is Alexander the Great's wife. Little history lesson. Alexander the Great, way back when, 3,000 years ago, wanted to take over Persia, and he wanted to take the most prized possession of Persia, hence he took the princess named Roxana. And the reason she's given her name Powerful Princess is after many years of being with him, whatever, doing life, she saw so much evil in him of how he wanted to conquer such a beautiful empire and make it his own. Instead of sharing, that she actually poisoned him and called her powerful Roxana. If you look up his death, it actually says, unknown, God save.
Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much to the panelists for having such a interactive discussion, and of course, thank you to the audience for interacting. We love to hear it. I think it's very admirable that we can name and tell the stories of women from so long ago impacting the world so severely and strongly, and then also trace it back to women in the modern day and our moms and grandmas. So that's really amazing. So we'll wrap up this section and we will move on to Shaz and Zeenia, who are going to speak on the main challenges that Zoroastrian women experience within the community and how we can overcome these challenges as women and, of course, as allies in the community.
As they're speaking, I would like for you guys to think about your home and your workplace and your space, your community, and consider if it is an equitable place for the women in your life.
So have the formative questions gone up? All right. So before we start, I know that Shirin, Farzin, everyone kind of talked about how historically the role of women, there were a lot of biases and there was a lot of inequality. And I know that times have changed quite a bit. But just before going into the challenges faced by women today, we just wanted to go over the difference between the terms equality and equity, because I know that a lot of times these words are used interchangeably. So equality, while it sounds great, it doesn't really take into consideration people's individual differences. So gender, disability, race, all of that. Whereas equity, on the other hand, does. It calls for more of an equitable outcome. So just keeping that in mind while we're discussing. So the first challenge that we'll go through is just gender roles and societal norms. So while the world has changed a lot, unfortunately, we still live in a very patriarchal society. And traditional gender roles and societal norms still keep women at an inequitable place as compared to men. And while Zoroastrianism, like Zoroastrians in general, are considered more liberal, it still exists in our society and it still exists in our world. So even while we still have women going out in the workplace and getting jobs, going to university, they're still considered the primary, they have the primary responsibility to still take care of the children and take care of the house, even though they're also still going to work and all. Do you want to go on to the next point?
Yep, sure. So when you guys look at our Zoroastrian women all over the world, they're very dynamic, successful, courageous. So in Freddie Mercury's words, there had to be a Freddie reference, they really are killer queens full of dynamite and laser beams. So they've flourished in history in various fields of endeavour, and they're very strong role models with their progressive vision, their hard work, and magnificent role in holding our culture and faith together. Now, there are so few women in our community holding positions of influence and senior leadership in our Zoroastrian community. So, for example, on our Zoroastrian Trust Funds of Europe committee in the UK, I'm only one of 4 women on the committee and the youngest member. So we all know the benefits of having women leaders, such as enhancing collaboration, inspiring organisational dedication, bringing a more humane perspective to things, promoting fairness and promoting sort of equality. However, the youth play a very important role in bringing about this change, to ensure that we have more representation on committees. With the Youth Congress, we've been very blessed in having Sherry and Zeenia as our co-chairs, and they've just shown, the power. They've just shown the power of Zoroastrian women, and they're incredible. And I really can't think of anyone else who would have organised this Congress better. So they are amazing. So the question now is, how can we harness the power of Zoroastrian women for the betterment of our community in the future? So I think these are sort of some action points, for us to all sort of take on board. So firstly, I think it's very important for us and the older generation to talent spot, encourage and mentor young people, especially young people into positions of leadership and women. So what's very important is to give the youth and women confidence and opportunities as well to flourish and just show what they can do. And essentially a changing of the guard is what is required to make way for this, to bring in that new blood and energy. So we do need to make sure that we ensure this is an inclusive community by encouraging sort of leadership for the youth and women. And it's essentially in our hands now as the youth, to do this. Secondly, I think that we need to have at least 50% of women on every single community committee worldwide. So I think that's something we need to aim for. It's for various Zoroastrian organisations and our communities, which we are part of, to take this seriously now and to actually make this happen.
Can we just go back one slide? Thank you. Okay, so another challenge faced by Zoroastrian women is the acceptance of women with non-Zoroastrian spouses and their children. And while this may be a bit of a generalization, the trend usually is, and especially in developing countries, that women who have non-Zoroastrian spouses and their children are less likely to be accepted by the society and by the community when you compare it with men and their non-Zoroastrian spouses and their children. So a lot of the times the women are the ones who are shunned. They're considered not to be part of the religion anymore, and their children in some communities and in some countries are not allowed to have like their Nawjot, for example, because they have a non-Zoroastrian father. And again, these things, like going back to overcoming these challenges, the more you have open conversations, the more you have acceptance, we need to have more of these conversations. And the role of men plays a big, it plays a big role over here as well. Because we need to get the men involved in having these open conversations so that we can move towards the right track. And if we could just go back to the challenges part again. So I'll briefly, Shaz and I will both cover the part about purity and prayer. So I know that this is a very big debate, but the treatment of women when they menstruate, it's quite a controversial topic. But I personally believe that having someone targeting my purity when I go through a completely natural cycle, it's absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that some priests don't even mention or actually have the audacity to ask if a woman is menstruating before he prays the Tandarosti, because sometimes they don't include that person's name while they're praying the Tandarosti. So basically you're telling me that because I'm menstruating, I don't deserve to be prayed for, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. Shaz has a couple of more points on this as well.
Yeah, sure. So now on the other hand as well, because we do want to keep this a balanced conversation, it is believed by some people that a woman is weaker in terms of her immunity and spiritual vibrations. So that makes her weaker in the cosmic battle between good and evil. And I just have to add, this is not my opinion, this is just what some people believe. And so because of that, because of their weakened state, they should be given the opportunity to rest. Also, there's this whole purity issue as well. Things like blood is considered dirty, unclean. And some people argue that this rule applies to men as well. So if a man has an open wound, he's not allowed to participate in religious ceremonies. Another point to also mention is, women in olden days, and I hear stories from my mum about this, they had to sleep on metal beds, during their time of the month. And, question is, how humane is this in a religion that advocates good deeds? It's not intended, so some people also say it's not intended as a punishment, and it's because metal's an element that doesn't absorb germs. Now, in our Gathas, or Zarathustra's teachings, there isn't any kind of reference to menstruation. And these rules of purity were man-made and several centuries later in the Vendidad. Plus, they were made by male priests. So women were not part of that conversation. So to be completely honest, I grew up in a traditional Parsi family. So this is something that, I've been used to from an early age. And as I've grown older, I've just started to think and question, the status quo. And I think it's very important that we all do that. So I still don't know where I stand on this issue. And I'm still exploring various aspects of this so that I can eventually form my own viewpoint. Because after all, our religion says, use your vohumano, use your good mind, decide what is the right path for you. So I don't necessarily think there's a right or a wrong, it's what you think is right. And I think it's very important for our youth to learn more about our religion so that we can decide what is right for us. And very importantly, respect different viewpoints and shape the future of our Zoroastrian communities. Now, the last challenge I'm going to cover is the stigma and lack of community support when it comes to domestic abuse. So there's no getting away from the fact that domestic abuse is something that happens in our community. But it's seen as a taboo subject, and quite frankly, I've never seen it openly discussed in a forum like this. So I do think it's important, for us to mention it and acknowledge it. We know that domestic abuse can take various forms. So it could be physical, it could be a sort of controlling behavior, economic abuse, coercive control is actually now recognized as an offence in UK law, and it's subject to an imprisonment sentence of 5 years. So before I start going into some of the issues, I should really add as well that men can be victims of domestic abuse as well, so we have to acknowledge that. Now, having been involved in the Zoroastrian community for the last 10 years, I have come across a number of Zoroastrian women who have experienced domestic abuse. And this can be either from their partner or father. So that's, their partner or their father. Now, given that I'm in a privileged position to have this platform here today, I do feel it's time now for us to start having this conversation. What I have seen is that, one, a lot of women don't even realize that this is happening to them until it's too late. And two, there is a stigma in our community attached to being a survivor of domestic abuse. This results in survivors, divorcees, those going through child custody battles, being blamed, shamed, gossiped about, and ultimately ostracized from the community, rather than our Zoroastrian community providing that valuable support at what is already a very difficult time. And it's the perpetrators who should feel disgraced, not the survivors. So this really needs to change, attitudes in our community towards this. So I've come up with a few points that I hope maybe various community organizations worldwide can implement. So first of all, I think there should be effective mechanisms and resources to support survivors of domestic abuse, and designated domestic and social welfare officers who are trained to offer help and support women, whether that's offering counselling in confidence, signposting to helpful resources, or having a dedicated women's group. The important thing here is for women to feel accepted and part of the community. What's also important is that we discuss these issues as a community and educate both men and women. So, for example, I run a children's sort of group in our community, an XYZ group, and we also have a teenagers discussion group. And we talk about things like this so that young people understand what is acceptable behavior and what isn't, so that they can think about their attitudes and grow up to be kind and well-rounded individuals. What also needs to change is that we need to start having these conversations so that the stigma is removed. We should not be afraid to call out abusive behavior if we see it and speak up, rather than turn a blind eye and agree, with certain community members due to either their high status or standing in the community. Sorry, just turning the page. Okay, so finally, I think the role of men as allies is very important. So in our women's panel in LA, one of the guys stood up and he asked the question at the end. He asked, "I'd just like to know what men can do for women to be part of the conversation." It was such an interesting and relevant question because we often leave men out of the equation and we forget that they can actively be allies too. As approximately 50% of the world's population and the population of this room are men, men can be active allies by ensuring gender equality. So what does it mean to be an active ally in practice? This means not just pandering to women and giving lip service, but by saying sure and yep, but listening and understanding the issues. Having conversations with other men as to how we can change the community for the betterment of women, and being the catalyst in our friendship groups to correct any gender biases, and following up with actions that further the cause of equality. Men can also encourage women to take up senior leadership positions on committees in the Zoroastrian community. As the youth, we ultimately have the responsibility to shape the community. And men also have an important role in bringing together these things to the forefront. So let's empower and celebrate our women.
So I'd like to share some of the results from the questions that I asked with this slide. When asked, do you feel like your home is an equitable space? 60% of you said yes. When asked if your workplace was an equitable space, only 48% of you said yes. And when asked if your local Zoroastrian community was an equitable space, the percentage goes down to 32%. So how are we going to make sure that our communities, our spaces are more equitable? Personally, leading Zeenia with Kimya and Farzin, I have never felt like there's any conversation I can't have with Parshan because he's always willing to listen and talk it out. I feel really supported by my community because everybody's here to show up. I would love to see a 50-50 representation on our Zeenia leadership board. Is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in. So the Zoroastrian Youth of North America is what Zeenia stands for, and there's currently 3 co-chairs, and 2 of these 3 co-chairs are women, and it's Farzin and I. And thanks to Farzana, which is the that whole North America, which is the U.S. and Canada, they have given us this position of power, and that is that older generation showing that they're practicing these things, at least in North America. And who knows, maybe our 3rd co-chair will one day be a woman too. And like, we strive for equality, but this is like, more than equality that we're getting, at least in North America, which is something that I'm very proud of and grateful to all the men and women that helped make this happen. So I wanted to point that out. Also, I wanted to just touch on the last 2 points that you made. So I had an abusive father, and I want to open this conversation to talk about it. And his family was very abusive as well, and we went through 10 years of divorce court proceedings from when I was 12 to 22. And so I wanted to make sure that I don't repeat any of these cycles. And, I picked the right partner, and so I specialized in psychology. I read every book I could. I got a master's in it, and I made sure that I picked an amazing husband, and I did. And so I would like to thank Armand for really showing me what an amazing man can be, and that you do exist. And to my 2 younger brothers, Omid and Mazda, who are 6 and 7 years younger than me, thank you for making me feel so supported in every way, and really making me feel that there's nothing that you guys could have done more to make me feel more empowered as a woman. And I know you are going to be amazing, amazing partners and leaders, and just really representing women. And to see that cycle break is so rewarding for me to see. And just trying to spread that as far and wide. And I do see a huge generation gap from people that grew up in different countries to growing up in the Western world and other places in the world. So there is a huge shift, and I see it, and I've seen it in my own life, and I'm very proud to see it.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much, the panelists, for sharing so candidly and starting conversations that need to be had absolutely in so many different spaces as well, and offering specifics, because I know, in discussions or, when so many people are together and so many opinions can be existent, things are talked about a little more vaguely, and we leave without an idea of what to think about. But I think today left everyone with food for thought, absolutely. So thank you guys for being so open and, being a catalyst for these conversations that are very, very important to have, and hopefully change will come from them. And thank you again for inspiring the youth, which is the purpose of this Congress, I think. So we will shift back to Shirin and Farzin to talk about the next topic, which is the power that comes from actually having women in notable positions. And if Farzin and Shirin can include their own experiences in this, that would be wonderful as well. We would love to hear it.
Thanks for that, Anisa. So you're seeing a picture at the top of the group of founding women over a century ago in Karachi, at the Karachi Zirdosti Banu Mandal. And I'm sure you've heard of the name before. It's a group of women that come together to serve the needs of the community. the needs look different over a century ago, they look different now, and they're adapting all the time. I'm serving, having served on this committee now for a couple of years, seeing the passion that these women work with in areas of education, rehabilitation, medical, healthcare. But the reason why the picture is placed there is because it shows you the KZBM, and the word Zoroastrian or Zoroastrian. So as an Iranian Zoroastrian, having grown up in Pakistan, Parsi is the more common term, of course, used to describe the group of Zoroastrians that migrated to India a couple of thousand years ago. And so having unable to find that Iranian identity within all the Parsi associations, we have our Karachi Parsi Institute, we have the Parsi Gate, we have, just you name it, Parsi is there, and everybody knows you as a Parsi, not as a Zoroastrian, and that comes with education in your journey. But the point with the KZBM was, as a group of women over a century ago, they were able to recognize the ways in which various parts of our community are marginalized. And rather than going the Parsi route, they chose to stick with the Zoroastrian identity. And I think that speaks volumes of just how your lived experience contributes to the impact that can be made on an individual level, on a community level, institution level, and then hopefully worldwide level. And so that's what I want to leave you here with today, just in how you can be that force for inclusivity. And I know we're talking about women in Zoroastrianism, but here we're talking about race, we're talking about sexual identity, we're talking about gender identity, and how can you create that inclusivity with just a simple term, even if it's Zoroastrian. So that's me.
Would you like to share a little bit about Zasha?
Yeah, so Zasha, some of you might have heard about Zasha. So Zasha is a group that was set up by Zabanu Gifford, who runs the Asha Centres. So that's Mark's mum. So Mark, who did the icebreaker with you on Friday. And as many of you know, she's an incredible lady, a human rights campaigner, and she set up the Haven that is the Asha Centre, which does a lot of interfaith work. Now, Zabanu came up with this initiative called Zasha, which is essentially a Zoroastrian women's empowerment group and a website that celebrates Zoroastrian women. And we've got on there close to maybe 1,000 Zoroastrian women from different fields. So we've got a commander in the US Navy, we've got painters, we've got exceptionally sort of creative people and pioneering women. So this is an interesting website. I would encourage you to have a look at it. And if you're ever looking for a woman in a particular field as well, say you want to have a mentor as well, I would suggest, going on this website and literally all this information's at your fingertips. And also for all the women in here as well, we'd love to have you on there to showcase, the talents. And it's really astounding when you start reading all the bios, all the achievements. It's really, really amazing.
So one thing I feel like Fazana does really well in North America is our past presidents stick around and they become part of the general community and, chair a committee instead of taking on the whole thing. So we have really fantastic leadership in Dali Dastur, and they're always really supportive in what we're doing. So next I wanted to kind of take a minute and talk about the anatomy of being a good leader. So as the leader of Zeenia, I'm constantly looking at the future, not in terms of just what do we need to get done next, but how is our work going to affect the next 10 years, the next 20 years of what Zeenia has to accomplish, and always kind of keep that in mind. One of my favorite things to do as people join Zeenia is I like to have an hour-long conversation with them. Yes, it's time-consuming, but I really get a chance to know our new members as they come in, and it's really rewarding to be able to connect people. And I guess it really takes a lot to take on a big organization, but I always find that there's a lot of support around you. So don't hesitate to take on something big just because it feels overwhelming. You can always find a great group of people. You see all the Zeenia members in their Zeenia t-shirts today. They've been amazingly supportive of the work that we're doing. So then for me, Yes Not 30.2 has always been a really important part of the way that I lead. I always try to listen to what everybody else's perspective is and then try to make the best decision from what I've heard. Is there anything else anybody would like to add?
I'd just like to jump in. Farzin does everything she does. She's there for every single one of us, and she runs a full-time job, and she manages 300 children in her job and everything else that she does. And I'd like to highlight how important it is to be responsive. I can text her anytime and she's responsive, I don't know, usually within minutes, to be honest, but an hour, 2 hours, and handling everything. And I think that is, I am so grateful to have you, honestly. So that responsivity and just being such a role model to all women is amazing. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely. And of course, this is a women's panel and this is a global kind of conference. And, we've mentioned Zeenia a few times, but of course, we want to inspire youth to kind of take experiences or lessons back with them and continue fostering, Zoroastrian youth in their own homes. So please feel free to learn from these really, really amazing women. Truly, I've learned so much in the span of 6 months. I got introduced to these people in January, and it's been really, really inspiring and really great. And change has come from it. These are actionable items, and these congresses are social, of course, but truly things do come from it. So I think we're all really benefiting here. Thank you for explaining your experiences, and of course the audience for sitting and listening and internalizing everything, because it is very important. So we will move on to the last topic of conversation for today, and Kimya will take this one away. Kimya will talk about Ashu Zarathustra's thoughts on the role of women in Zoroastrianism.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just before I jump in, I wanted to highlight one thing that I learned from after getting to know my husband and his family, which really inspired me. So my husband's grandmother, I found out, was one of the very first women in Iran to become a female lawyer. And this is just, I've met her. So this is someone within our, timeline. And not only did she become one of the first women to be lawyers in Iran, she became the first judge of Iran, the female judge of Iran. And they built a town from nothing. And that's just so inspiring to hear that a female in a place like Iran was able to do that. So that was just a really inspiring thing that I got to learn in the last couple of years, which I'm really grateful for. So jumping into this topic, in 2014, I went to my first Congress, and it was in Los Angeles, and I was sitting there with my cousin, and we were looking at a panel of young priests, and we were so proud to see young modern priests up there, but they were all men. And I looked over to my cousin in 2014, and I said, we should be up there, we're at least from priest families, we've been grown up with this sort of thing, we should be up there. So that's kind of where this journey started, and then I've tried to learn more and more about this topic of seeing women up there as equivalent priests. And so, we've gone through the gathas with myself and with other people, and there's nothing in there that differentiates men and women in any way. And that's something I'm so proud of, that 4,000 years ago was written there. And so there's nothing but equality in the gathas. And then so then I dived into it more and I realized, okay, there is a difference. There are now some women that are mubedyars, which is amazing. We're starting to see women in white, and that's such a powerful thing. And then they're called mubedyar, and for anyone that doesn't know, that means it's an assistant to a mubed. So they're not equivalent in what they can do. Granted, in some places, because there's a lack of mubeds, mubedyars can do everything a mubed does because there's just no other male mubeds around. But that's the differentiator. And so, I've contacted India, originally asking the question, can I be trained as a mubed? I've been told no recently. I contacted NAMC, and they said, we can help train you as a mubedyar, but not a mubed. And I contacted Iran, the Iranian Mubed Council, and they, again, also said, we can train you as a mubedyar, but not a mubed. So I have a long line of priests from Iran in my family. One notable one was there representing Zoroastrians in parliament in Iran when the revolution happened, and he contributed to the flag remaining green, white, and red instead of turning black. So that was cool to know that, there are people that can do incredible things in difficult situations. So I was like, we need to see women as equivalent mubeds. So I started the process of becoming a mubedyar through Iran in the last few years. And they sent me, and I'm the first person they accepted that wasn't born and raised in Iran, because I soon learned, as soon as they did accept me, it's honestly like a PhD to learn how to become a mubedyar, which is the assistant to a mubed. And just so you guys can grasp the concept of what I had to kind of initially be faced with, just the first step after you've been accepted is to read 2 books in Farsi, written just in Farsi, one 250 pages and one 400 pages, and then you take a 20-page exam on that, and that's just step 1, and there's like so many steps. I have to learn Sanskrit, I have to learn all these things, and so I started this journey, and about 4 days a week, and my husband can keep me honest, I talk to my mom for an hour, and we chat GPT each page. One of the books I can copy paste, the other one I don't know what I'm going to do, but and we translate it, and I read it to my mom, and she fills in the gaps. And the reason this became possible is because I did 10 years of Persian school every Saturday to learn Farsi, to speak it, to be able to read it. I read like a snail, so it's very slow. But I'm translating it into English. And so, it's the ChatGPT version, but it's still something. And this is paving the way for more people to be able to learn all these things. And then, I got to learn how I've asked quite a few people, what's the process of becoming a mubed in India or in other places? And it's quite different. And so the journey that I'm kind of on is one day, hopefully I will graduate, and then become a mubedyar, and then from there figure out, can we get NAMC to come on board to recognize men and women as equal, as mubeds, or, on a global level, or through the Ashra Center, we'll just explore opportunities. But right now I'm just trying to get to the first milestone, which is incredibly difficult. And I don't know how many of you know how hard it is to become a mubedyar through Iran, and it really is. And we just want to make this process as easier and easier with time. And so that's just a bit of an insight into my mission on being able to see men and women equally be represented as mubeds. And so I wanted to put to you guys this question: in your opinion, should men and women be equivalent mubeds? And I would really appreciate if you guys could just state your opinions, whatever they are, on a survey, just so we can get an updated viewpoint on right now where we're at. Roxana.
What's the main difference between it? You said assistance, but what are some practices that a mubed can do that a mubedyar can't practice?
Yeah. Yeah, so usually weddings and sedra pushis and things like that are not done by a mubedyar. Mubedyar can assist, but they do not lead these things. They just, most of these like things mubeds do. It's just the assistant that's there. And it's like, imagine learning all of these things for all of these years and then just being an assistant. So it's kind of crazy. I see a hand. Yeah. No one gives us strong, like no one has given me like a direct reason for why not. Yeah, I think I think the main thing stems from like this later thing with the whole purity thing and the women, like that whole thing, but no one explicitly says that's the reason you can't. I know that both Iran and India are more patriarchal systems, and so they're kind of operating from those countries. I know, especially in Iran, like it's quite more limited, but it's like we've now lived a few generations out of these countries, and we each can make our own choice. So just on these formative, responses, I think the last, when I asked India, and they wrote an article about it in the Persiana, the last survey that was taken on this question was, I think, 15 years ago, and it was taken in India, and at the time, 15 years ago, 85% of the people that answered this survey, and I don't know how big the sample size was, but 85% no, women should not be, an equivalent mubed. And so we need updated data, and this is just a data point that if we can answer this question now as a group, this is a new data point we can point to that say in 2023 in London, this is the World Youth Stage. Where are we at now? And this is really helpful for moving this forward. So, hand.
Would you be able to put the QR code up again?
Yeah.
Can we flip back to the first slide?
Thank you so much for asking that practically.
So the results were really warming my heart. We're hovering over 94% right now.
Oh, thank you guys. Wow.
Or yes,
Yes.
that.
Yes. But no.
Let me read the question. Should women be allowed to be an equivalent mubed as to a man? And 95 say yes.
Wow. Yes.
Which is
Woo!
great,
What's
which
the
is
sample size on that? Do we know the sample size?
I can look it up later.
Okay. She'll look it up later. Heartwarming, guys. Thank you. And yeah, anything you guys can do to help support women in these roles, help that equivalency and women being mubed will make such a huge positive difference. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. So we do have 2 minutes left if there are any other questions or if the panelists would like to say any final remarks. But other than that, I will say my final remarks. Thank you all so much for your attention today. I really felt great things coming from this side of the room, and of course, really good listening from this side. So I'm really inspired, and thank you again for attending and participating.